Hey, hey, friends, welcome to the 55th Lazarus Symposium, running live. I'm in the studio here in Bacalar Laguna in Mexico, and I'm trying to do something ridiculous, which is to speak to my audience through the Lazarus platform, and at the same time, I'm streaming through my Instagram using my iPhone just to kind of bypass the deplatforming that's been going on. I'm here for another 2 weeks. And then I'm headed to Los Angeles, and I will be doing the Conscious Life Expo on the 20th of February. And I will be on the 8 p.m. on the 20th. It's a pretty important talk that I'm doing. To me, it's certainly very important. Curiously enough, I've been graciously invited to do all the three main expos. The Conscious Life Expo followed in Los Angeles, followed 2 weeks later by the one in Palm Beach. That's the New Life Expo. And then the following month, I'll be doing the Conscious Living Expo in San Rafael back in, I think that's in California as well, I'm pretty sure of it. In any event, my purpose for going back to the US 3 times in a row to these expos is to speak to what it is that we're unveiling in the New Earth movement. And that is the biggest thing we've been working on for some years. This is the year 2026. I've been very excited about this pronouncement. When do we get to the point where we're taking back some real measure of autonomy and sovereignty from the third-party intervention? That, of course, is what the whole New Earth movement is about. It's what the Lazarus Initiative is about. It's what my own life's work has been about. It is about stepping into full jurisdiction in the simplest terms. So whilst in 2024, end of 24, throughout the whole of last year, as those of you who are following my travels know, I was just moving non-stop, multiple times to Africa, Asia, Africa, Central and North America, and seeding the New Earth micronation jurisdictions. So those are moving forward nicely, and those formal announcements will be coming this year, certainly in the first half of this year. But the big piece is the unveiling of the New Earth Exchange and the New Earth Treasury and the New Earth Bank. So those 3 things, an exchange, treasury, and a bank, are what I'm doing the soft unveil at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles in a couple of weeks' time. This is the first people's exchange of NFTs and of cryptos. So with the bank, and we were just on this morning, my whole team were on with the bank. That is so exceptionally exciting. Everyone will be able to this year have their own bank card, have their own money, own their own money, absolutely, in an inward-looking a jurisdiction that is tethered to the so-called real-world jurisdiction. So you can use that card in ATMs, you can move your cryptos around and your this, that, and the other around, so fiat crypto. It's really the indivisible line between the old satanic system and the real 0-point economy that we've been slowly building our New Earth Nation movement toward. And that all lands and docks this year. It's going to rely on people of the world to either get it or not and participate or not. But I can tell you it is incredibly exciting because we've never been in a position, I say we, humanity has never been in a position where we could truly restore ourselves into our true jurisdiction, because money was always the issue, was it not, friends? And who controls the money and who controls what you can do with it or where you can send it and how you can spend it. So that was always how the Babylonian priesthood and the Khazarian mafia have always orchestrated the world in that way. So the point being here, it's very, very exciting where we're now headed. Very, very exciting. I'm just getting notes from Christy, which worry the hell out of me. So I've had to switch my screen. Christy, if there's a problem, you just come in and talk over me because I'm enlarging my screen here. Once it's enlarged for the Instagram audience, I don't get, are we all good? You hearing me okay?
Yeah, you were on your side. So maybe you need to change your phone.
I can't really do that because if I do that, we don't, okay, I'll tell you what, let me try that. Thank you. No, you know what? It's okay. People can hold their phone aside for the moment, just for this piece that we're doing.
Yep.
So jump out of the studio. I'll continue with my little piece. Thank you. All right, so let me just finish up. That's the big piece this year is the bank, the treasury, and the sovereign exchange. We've got over $5 billion worth of government projects, infrastructure projects that are going to be listed on the NewEarth exchange. This is not just an exchange for you and I, for people who understand sovereignty and understand the crypto world and understand decentralization. What I'm saying to you is we've also got very, very big entities realizing that where we're taking this, they're going to have to transition as well. And what does that mean? It means that people of the world will be able to buy tokens and NFTs and cryptos connected to building of bridges and schools and clinics and product development and anti-gravitational technologies. And all of that can now be listed on our exchange, okay, within a very consolidated ecosystem. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be doing the soft unveil at these expos. And then on the 20th of March, I believe, March, I believe we've chosen that date line, which is the equinox, to do a huge unveil or hard launch on the World Wide Web. So that will be announced from the 20th of February to the 20th of March. There's going to be a big marketing campaign to try and get eyeballs in. And then on the day, on the 20th of March, we're planning to do the big hard launch. So please, everyone, stay tuned to that. We'll make announcements on the Lazarus platform, on all the NewEarth platforms, and on Sacha Stone platform to that end. What better way to introduce Jane Evershed, my beloved matron-in-chief of the pundits that we bring forward through the Lazarus Symposium over the last 5 years. And I do believe Christy's controlling the studio. I'm hands off the console for the first time, which is delightful. But please welcome Jane Evershed, who is, I am told, turning the spotlight on me. Go for it, girl.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Sacha, and it is even better to be in the cockpit for once. So I just want to start out by, I've always wanted to tell you this. I wanted to say thank you so much for giving a platform to people like me, Dave Emery, and so many others who academia would put a whip to and send them packing. And I really appreciate that. So I wanted you to know that right away. And then you and I, we've got a kind of a history going back with Tartaria, almost like 6 years or so. And I've noticed, and I'm wondering if you've noticed this too, and how you reconcile it with your current thinking about how the world is going forward now. But we've seen Donald Trump has said he wants the World Expos to come back. And just recently, he said he wanted asylums to return. And then we've got Elon Musk with all his anti-gravity stuff. We're lifting off the ground all over the place in shoes and bikes and mopeds. And it's looking so eerily like the end of Tartaria before. But more than that, Sacha, we've got the underground children coming up from the dumbs. We've got all the rescue of the sex trafficking children. And we've got this huge immigration swells into countries, almost like replacing the existing. And then on top of that, we had the COVID culling of the population. So it's almost an exact replica of the end of Tartaria. So how do you reconcile that with your future of the world? Because it looks pretty eerie to me.
Very good. Christy, you might want to just maximize frames when someone's speaking for the purposes. Thank you. So that's a terrific question. And the way I see it is not quite the way that you do, because whereas the fall of ancient Tartaria was a takedown of a golden age, a grand epoch of extraordinary prowess, consciousness, electrification of the planet, frequency technology, extended life, and so on and so forth. But that elevation of art and beauty that eventuated into the grandiosity of ancient Tartaria, that was a golden age, clearly. I mean, just go back to the Mahabharata, go back and understand arcane history, look at the last vestiges of the Golden Age architecture that you can still see in Rome and Paris and Vienna and Chicago and Philadelphia and London and Johannesburg. All around the world, we're still seeing the last vestiges of that great age. People have still not in the mainstream computed what happened. They still think that men with little buggies and chisels created those cathedrals and buildings. But that's no disrespect, but that's the great unwashed, intellectually speaking, who still can't see beyond the civilizational cognitive dissonance and the dystopia. But those of us who can see and who have been paying attention and realize that we had the Vimana flying anti-gravitational technologies thousands of years ago, that even up until a century or so ago, we had these technologies extant. That was a takedown of, so the reset that occurred there with the takedown of ancient Tartaria was a takedown of a golden age. Fast forward to today, which answers your question, and we're seeing a takedown of a Saturnian satanic sleep cycle that has occurred in a compression state since the takedown of Tartaria till today. In point of fact, we're moving into a resurrection of a golden age. And of course, there is an interweaving and an interfolding of paradigms, technologically speaking, psychoculturally speaking, intellectually speaking. There's an interweaving, there's a crossing over. So the Elon Musks of this world are coming in with Optima and extraordinary technological breakthroughs, which are foundationally still captured within the Luciferian age, but they are promising to free us up from the mundane, from the drudgery of that Saturnian age. But they're still leading us, in a sense, into I wouldn't say a kill grid, but I would say into a Skynet, a grid that is still going to be containing and monitoring and surveilling everything and calculating everything by AI and trying to contain and continue to harvest humanity through a Luciferic upgrade from a satanic scenario. But here's the thing, it's not going to work. It's going to appear to work. It's going to work in some sense, but the technology is simply going to allow for humanity to take stock and to begin to dwell upon our own navel, so to speak, and to begin to recognize that we are the technology. Because where do you go after Optima? Where do you go after some fucking 4-foot android is trundling around after you, picking up your litter or making your breakfast or giving you a blowjob, as I said to the bankers early on the call today? Who knows where these little servant class androids are taking us? One imagines it's going to lead us straight into appetite. It's going to be that people are going to be having full-fledged relationships with their androids within 3 to 5 years. That is an absolute certainty. So that is part of a transhumanist agenda. That is a Luciferic age agenda that is trying to create a capture 2.0 of human plasma. It will not work. It'll have a backfire mechanism, which is that it'll decentralize things sufficiently and deconstruct the kind of wage slavery paradigm sufficiently for humanity to sit back, breathe for the first time in millennia. And those are then who are operating at heart frequency and above, meaning to say angelic indigo, fractal antenna, DNA frequency in capacitance. Those who are able to actually be real humans are the ones that are going to see immediately through the folly of a Luciferic upshift and literally end the contract. So we are going to see that full bifurcation from people choosing still to live in a simulated reality, which is AI augmented and which offers absolute freedom and the apparency of that. And then you're going to have people like us, dare I say, who actually want to completely terminate the contract with the corporation altogether. And moreover, who have learned how to do it by now. We understand law, we understand jurisdiction, we understand history, we understand the ancient compacts and treaties that indentured us into lab rat wage slavery, and we're not having it anymore. And we don't need to have it anymore, because the Luciferian guard that are taking over from the Saturnian, satanic guard, they will allow for that bifurcation because they cannot contain or control it. So you're going to see people leaving the grid, moving into these utopian micronation satellite kind of enclaves and communities and micro civilizations. Certainly we've started seeding already New Earth. It's exactly what I'm doing in Africa and Asia and Central America ultimately, but we're focused, the big picture is focused on African micronations and then Asian micronations. Ultimately, that'll become the antidote to the Luciferic capture, and people will begin to feel it, because people don't want to be cosseted, looked after, and nannied beyond a certain point. They want to get back into the mud. They want to make shit with their hands. They want to feel, the hurricane, the breeze of a hurricane. They want to get into living and embodied living. Embodied living. You cannot be embodied fully if you're living in a Luciferic Elon Musk sponsored a grid system or Skynet system. So we're going to see that bifurcation continue between the perfected simulation humanity paradigm and the true angelic indigo human paradigm. And we know which side of that line we're standing on.
Well, I've always thought that Tartaria meant little Tartaria, and that we were at the point where we don't need those domes and buildings and churches and cathedrals anymore, because this is our dome.
Yeah.
So we're moving forward in that way on an organic level. And the other thing is that when you have coherence, especially organic coherence, it just dissolutes the distortion and the inversions anyway, and they can't function because the resonance has become so high. But that's just a comment. This is all about you, Sacha. So let me go to my next question. Thank you for that. It was fantastic. People are placing a great deal of expectation, and they put a lot of meaning onto you and what you're doing. So for those who may not realize the scope that your work covers, could you walk us through what you've done in service to this transition to New Earth, and perhaps what you've built and put in motion over the past decade or so? And also, I want to add too, what inner practices have helped you stay coherent and long-sighted over time? And at the deepest level, are you primarily driven by a sense of injustice or something else entirely?
Okay, thank you. And excuse me drinking coffee. I can't bear it when I see people eating or drinking on podcasts. And I thought I was off screen. That's why I was stealing it. But curious enough, the technology I use is caffeine. So there you have it. So my technology is caffeine and the odd rolled up organic cigarette. So I have both of them in front of me. And I also have, as I've been pointing out lately in interviews, the technology of the Hopi, and I've got the technology of the ancient Mahabharata as well. Oops, here, which I've showed multiple times. The Vajra Dorj, which I rely on, and the Australian talking sticks, which are the clarifying technology that banish bad spirits. So, in simple terms, I've lived a life of irreverence and being outside of the main frame. So I was born, as you know, similar to you, I was born in a war in Africa, and then in apartheid, and then I was a refugee for about 9 odd years, and then got into kind of my own shock doctrine through rock and roll and poetry and what have you, and then that morphed into activism, frontline activism. First, it was citizen diplomacy from 1999 up until about 2003 or 4, and it was around about 2004 when it landed. I'd met with sufficient leadership to realize that I was moving not just against stream and upstream, but it would never ever amount to a hill of beans if I just continued to talk up peace and to talk about ideas and come up with solutions and put them out there. That wasn't going to architect or engineer a paradigm shift. And so that was a a tremendous despondency came over me at that time, and I realized I had to move further onto the front foot and become more irreverent in that sense toward imposed authority. And that's exactly what I did. I then started to reconstruct my foundation and the work I was doing from citizen diplomacy and peace initiatives and intercultural, interfaith kind of focused stuff, and trying to network leadership into having dialogue. That was the emphasis of my work. And that was where I understood the premise of diplomacy and became very, very adept at it. But then I moved into hardcore, what you would loosely call research. I've never claimed I'm a good researcher, but I did get pulled into the basement. And I started having conversations with the leadership about that stuff, about the Masonic occultic element and aspect, which led to the satanic, and then the occultic blood ritualistic, and understanding the grotesquerie of the civilizational basement, so to speak. And once I got to grips with that, I couldn't walk away from it, because once you see the truth of something and you understand about the children, you understand about the sacrifice of innocence, you understand about the trafficking, you understand about how the Catholic Church and governments formed to become this enslavement technology that is predicated on ritual sacrifice of innocence, and that is the baseline. So you learn that, and you either join the club and you become, I guess you can live the rest of your life out moderate in some kind of modicum of security in Monte Carlo or, Geneva or whatever, as these priest banker motherfuckers do, because they know what's going on, but they turn a blind eye. They kept their foot in the door. They stay out of it themselves. They don't necessarily get involved, but they become the enablers of the satanic status quo. That then drip feeds down into academia and the entertainment complex and into media, and becomes the technology that captures humanity into the status quo and makes the status quo acceptable and normal. And that's the horror of the mundane, horror that you then realize. So I moved hard then into researching and learning about that. Then I created the NewEarth Project, because I realized I would have to, come out from behind the curtain, because prior to that I would never do public speaking. I was too terrified to, and probably didn't believe sufficiently in my own voice anyway. So I used to get very brilliant people, a couple of whom I still work with, Dr. David Martin. I would bring David in to give speeches at the United Nations. I'd get Justice Chris Cleverly. I didn't want to do things like that. I always steered stuff from behind the curtain. And there was a given day when I realized I had to put all my currency on the table, and that was in 2012, 2013. And then I stepped out and started doing public speaking. It was very, very well received, which would shock the hell out of me, because I never thought I had any capacity for it. And then I got to a point where I decided I would never allow myself to be scripted. I would always parachute in. And if I couldn't speak to something on a stage freely, in pure truth, in the living moment, then I shouldn't be speaking. So I started to form this, again, my irreverence started to forge a very unique and integrated approach to activism, to dealing with the shit show of reality, which is to be as bold as a lion and to lean into life every day, and to be fearless and to be timeless as well. So I then put out a short film, which with Belgium television, on Beyond Time, Money and Fear. That became a thing, became a popular meme at the time, and triggered the genesis of the NewEarth template. And then I set up the International Tribunal for Natural Justice in 2015. That was 10 years ago. Went through 3 years of getting rocks at the head before we launched our first Judicial Commission of Inquiry in Westminster, London. And that then led to getting some kind of recognition on the world stage, not in the mainstream. They're still castigating and vilifying and trying to demean and diminish me at every opportunity. So the death threats have continued all the way. Last death threat I received was about 20 weeks ago. So, 4 or 5 months ago. So those still go on. I still get letters from powerful military intelligence folks warning me. I have visits saying, settle down, step back. I've had police come to my home and sit down, talk to me. I've had serious players warn me, defense ministers, warned me. So I've had all of these warnings and this, that, and the other over the years, and every time I've ignored them. I've said, thank you, yes, thank you, I understand. But my sense of irreverence is still more alive in my nature, my character, than any reflex into fear or advice from third parties. So that's my technology. My technology is irreverence to any imposed authority, and to only follow the inner dictate. That is what I've used. That is who I am. I continue to use that inner dictate, and it is right most of the time. It's always right in the long term. In the near term, it's right and wrong variously, and we have challenges and obstacles. We crash and burn and have to rebuild and reset things up and take things forward. That's just life. And stamina is the other piece, to have, I think, superhuman capacity to take a punch in the face, rock at the back of the head, and to still get up, dust yourself down, and go #fuck you all. I see what I see, what I see. I know what I know, what I know. I'm born to this world for a period of time in this fictional hologram, and my will be done. My will be done. That's how I've taken things forward. And as you know, Jane, and thank you for your kind words at the beginning of this, I've reduced an incredibly complex kind of maelstrom of chaos and of psycho-intellectual fucking weirdness into simple algorithms. That's what I do. So when I talk about elevation of art, beauty, consciousness, 7 years ago, that was what I was talking about, saying that's the piece we need to understand. Elevation of art, beauty, and consciousness becomes an immediate means by which we can begin to transcend the mind fuckery of the status quo, of the endless, relentless propaganda. And that then moved into understanding the trifecta of technology, fellowship, and jurisdiction. And then I've been promoting that in the last few years, which is understand what jurisdiction is, claim jurisdiction, embody it, enact it, and then bring technology in as well, and bring fellowship, which is the most important thing of all, is how do we engender fellowship in this world? So I've been working on those three things. They now lock and load into what is now emerging this year, 2026, which is true cost economics / 0 point social ecology, 0 point social economy, which is the ultimate escape from the matrix in that sense. So that's a distillation of my method, my methodology, and I forgot the last half of your question, forgive me.
Don't worry about it, Sacha. You're already 4 questions ahead with everything that you just said. So you're completely tuned in. The other day, I heard you speaking and you happened to mention your guardians. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I must ask him about that. So do you mind telling us about your guardians? That aren't those little sticks and things, those little things you've got lying around, are they? More than that, surely.
No, nothing to do with that. Again, I use sticks and copal like we all do, just to cleanse and purify, a given environment. No, I am the cleansing technology. So I'm sufficiently conscious to know that that I am the technology, that this actualized Kundalini, this being here, the being and the doing are the same thing. My being has become my doing, and my doing has become my being, and that is the cross. That is the cross that we bear in pure truth and in right action. Life fucking hurts. Reality hurts. I don't numb the pain. I don't take synthetic molecules or any kind of substances to dull the pain and to hide from my supernature. And to realize one's supernature hurts. It's a journey of dragging yourself oftentimes across broken glass to get there, but we have to do it if we're serious about consciousness, and if we're serious about enlightenment, and if we're serious about achieving the mythic idea that we have of ourselves, because each of us believe that we have some mythic prospect ahead of us. We all want to fulfill this archetypal image we have of ourselves in our mind, which is to become the magician, or become the king, or become the great mother, or to become the Magdalene, become the Sophic or Christic wisdom keeper, or whatever the fuck it is. We have a mythic idea of who and what we are, and we're always wanting to merge into that. The problem is we're oftentimes led there down the wrong path, and we use simulation to live out that fantasy of what we are, but we don't actually arrive there to our supernature in an organic, sentient way. And that's the great disconnect. That's where every human being is blighted by appetite and by addictions. And if we can transcend our appetites and our addictions, and frankly, the appetite and addiction is the same thing. Once we can cross that line within ourselves, we can move into the bodhisattva. We can move into that state of real mythic status. I am in service to others over service to self. That is just the way it is. So I am prepared to bleed. I'm prepared to hurt. I'm prepared to take the systemic abuse and to not be rewarded in the manifest or material sense, because what I'm doing is the gold. What I am being and doing and represent, the living principle that I stand for, is the gold, is the philosopher's stone, is the ormus. And that's what each of us are led to. Now, we oftentimes forget, and this is getting to the answer of your question, we oftentimes forget the fact that we are also significantly supported from the hyperdimensional realms, significantly so. The situations that I've been in my life where I've dodged bullets and escaped death when forces have tried to kill me. And there are a handful of scenarios there, which you're probably aware of, and those who know my work will be aware of some of those stories. But what I noticed in just the top of my mind, three instances that come to mind: the eve of me bonding the International Tribunal with my thumb, with my fingerprint in 2015, and balaclavaed goons were sent ostensibly to kill me the night before, just after I'd dropped the Bishop of Jerusalem off at his accommodations in London, because he'd flown in to help consecrate the tribunal. And late that night, getting back home, I got mugged, or I got intercepted by balaclavaed goons before I could get from my car to my front door. And it was British Special Forces guys who intercepted that, and literally, in my view, saved my life that night. That's something I lived through, and it was awful. And it was, for me, there's so much that happened in that moment, because things slowed down, and I will at some point write about it. But I saw a protection cloak arrive around me personally. And I saw this also in North Africa on one occasion, being hijacked at gunpoint in the desert, and with one Bedouin guide who was prostrate with a gun at the back of his head, and me being remonstrated with by these very aggressive guys with turbans and camels and automatic weapons. And something happened to me on that instance when they were screaming at me with a gun at my face, telling me to get off my horse and get in on the sand on my face. And there was no part of me that would accept third-party intervention. There was no part of me that would accept that. And there was no fear whatsoever. None. Absolutely none. And under normal circumstances, thinking about that situation, I was going to be dead. I'm out there in the desert trying to meet with a terrorist leader. Shouldn't be where I'm going. That was some of the dangerous shit that I was doing back in the day. So that I remember, again, time dilated in that instance, and I saw my own protection emerge. And it was absolute. I am the authority in any venue in this world. In any venue in this world, I am the authority. And knowing that, that's where the knowing and the being coming and locking in to be the same thing becomes the armor of God. That's what I'm trying to get across here. So, then of course, when I was poisoned, and many people know that story, that was 9 years ago. Those three instances are three particular instances. They're not the only ones. There are a few others, but those three were ones where time dilates and you really begin to understand that there is a hyperdimensional physics at work. So now the other night, I'm going into my room and having a really very, very, not a hard time at the moment. There's just so much on. And, you know, we're all variously dealing with our different inescape in our life and having to, you know, weigh and measure and balance our emotional body, our psychological body, our biochemistry, and all the things that are going on. And I was exhausted, and I went to my bedroom, and I went in the dark to my bed, and I was finding my way through the dark. There's a huge room to get there. So if I turn the light off at the wall, I have to somehow navigate a whole bunch of different objects and not bang myself. So I've got quite good at it. But this particular instance, I remember navigating myself in pitch black, getting to bed and thinking, isn't it incredible? As a child, I was so filled with fear of the dark. And yet now in my ripe age, there's zero fear. And I just thought, oh my God, of course. And I sat on my bed in the dark and I just remembered my guides. And I honored them, and I did a little ceremony on my bed in the pitch black, and I invoked my guides, and they appeared, and there they were. And it was just, thank you. How easily we forget that we are carried in this world by invisible forces. And in some cases, it's the spirit of your departed grandmother or your departed beloved or whatever. In my case, it's not. These are totems, animal totems, and extra dimensional figures, and strange kind of goblin-y also netherworld entities that kind of tokolosh, like, you remember the tokoloshers in Africa. Yeah. So I just allowed this beautiful little family around me, and I said, I just want to thank you. I go through years on end without ever thanking you for being the guides, and you are the guides, and you are the ones who come and wrap around me in those life and death situations in life. So, it occurred to me how desperately important it is that each of us begin to actually acknowledge the fact that we are carried and supported by our guides. And when you can befriend them and begin to see them in this realm, it's an immensely powerful thing.
I would absolutely agree. And I would also love to say that I'm happy that you survived all those things to tell your stories too. So my next question is, I was recently listening to you, and you were saying that the first part of 2026, that the world is not going to be the same again. And you also mentioned that you hosted, I might be stepping on toes here, Sacha, forgive me if I am, but with white hats from Asia, North America, and elsewhere. And I'd love to know if you can give us any highlights that came out of that meeting and what changes you know about from insiders that you talked to.
I would need to really sit. I was watching Elon Musk yesterday on something that came up in my feed. And I thought, I really like the way that he can be asked a question, a pointed question, and he doesn't jump to an answer, even though he's incredibly quick mind, and he could easily formulate an answer. I love the way that he just sat for a long time. It was like 47 seconds of agonizing silence with the camera zooming in slowly, and he was just going further inward and thinking and really reflecting before he answered the question. So that's one of those questions that I would need to reflect on. But all I can say is that because there are so many permutations to it, and I've got a quick fix answer to it, and I've got a really abstract answer to it, but I can tell you that I'm at a point where I have met so many people in the military intelligence complex around the world. And I'm talking Russia, I'm talking Asia, I'm talking North America, I'm talking Europe, principally, and Australasia, actually. I have met with so many whistleblowers. I have met with so many sensitives, remote viewers, mystics, oracles, viziers. I've met with so many kings and queens and hereditary leaders and very powerful shamanic indigenous leaders. I've met with so many political leaders and office holders. I've met with so many pundits and experts in academia in all of these different spheres. And coming to the question, why last week I convened a meeting of powerful people involved, you could loosely call them white hats, involved in the emancipation of humanity through the financial reset, basically. People holding trillions of dollars worth of federal safekeeping receipts and collaterals, bonds, Genesis treaties, historical notes that underpin the calamity of the existing global financial system. And I also know people who are sitting behind the screens, pushing the buttons, coordinating the clearances of those funds that are moving around the world, variously from screen to screen, but not quite popping into the mainframe yet. And so I've been involved since 2005 when I was one of the, I wasn't a placeholder, but I was a trusted agent in carrying essentially trillions of dollars worth of federal safekeeping receipts in a suitcase. My foundation was instrumentally involved in trying to get the Federal Reserve at that time to free up and return some of the monies owed to these federal safekeeping receipt bonds over many, many years to countries in Asia. And I worked, I've got to be very careful what I say here, so I'm going to just stop the conversation there before it gets political. But I've been involved at that level in this movement toward the Great Reset. Last week, I thought, oh, fuck this. I've just got to ask people from 3 continents, can you come together and have a conversation and see if we can unlock some of this stuff by flashing our kimonos all at the same time. And they were all equal to it. It was a great meeting. And it began a number of conversations. So I made introductions between those 3 continents to some of these hats, and now they're involved in different conversations and threads connected to the gray screens, the off-ledger funds, and so on and so forth. And we'll see what we see emerge. But it's just one way of me wanting to move through the endless obfuscation of this reset, because the fact of the matter is that Donald J. Trump does not know when that reset is going to happen. And I have military generals and people on the phone almost every day, certainly every week. I'm communicating with hereditary leaders, with kings, with people who are controlling the screens, and each of them are variously good, really good humans, wanting emancipation for humanity, but being cock-blocked one way or the other in their in the way that they're advancing their instruments or their mandates. So the question then becomes, who or what is maintaining this endless blockage? And why does the Iraqi dinar never quite happen? Why does the Zim note never reach value? Why does the quantum financial system never quite land? Why do we not have all the radios and television sets on the planet instantly going into a planet-wide broadcast to tell about the Clintons and the Obamas and all that? Why do we never seem to meet that event horizon where the real shift point becomes palpable and known to everyone all at the same time? Well, the fact of the matter is it may well be that never actually happens, that we never end up having that shift point. It might just be that it's a kind of slow dissolution process of the satanic status quo as people become individually emancipated and then realize, I get it, and then move out of the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil and start to actually manifest and embody their own will in this world. I think it's something like that is about to take place. I don't know that there's going to be a singularity event horizon that's going to occur. I know some people are yielding. Some of these off-ledger funds are now moving into utility. It's a fascinating, incredibly ambiguous and esoteric story. I know that we, NewEarth, with our exchange, our bank, and what we're building forward and what we've been engineering now for a long time, I know that we are able to rely to a great extent on some of those collaterals in where we're taking our own inward-looking economy. But that white hat meeting was me trying to also get the answer to the question that you just asked me. And I don't have a finite answer. Doesn't matter how many conversations I have. There is no, and I'm speaking to people also directly connected into the Trump circle. I'm also instrumentally involved in getting people to go and petition and get the meetings with Trump. So who fucking knows is the answer, Jane. I have a feeling it's connected to morphogenetic upshift, and I think that is a numbers game. I think that's an equation that we're about to hit. And once we hit that, it's going to be twofold. It's going to be connected to the degree to which a certain demographic of humanity are able to override the synthetic intervention of their own DNA through substance abuse, alcoholism, and agrochemical and pharmaceutical systemic poisoning. So there's going to be a sufficient catalyzing moment inside where your own plasma, Christed plasma, is able to negate the geometry of the devil that's forging inside your DNA. That's happening. It's happened to me already, and it's continuing to happen. And I'm seeing it happen to others. So there's going to be a threshold event where that happens sufficiently, because the activated Kundalini and plasma from the inside is recorrecting the false light geometry. But there's also a macro event out there connected to the galactic plane, the ecliptic, the age of Aquarius, the fact that we've now moved in and are densely committed into the field of the photonic light, the vibral light, which is now impacting our solar system. And that is having a palpable effect on every so-called atom, so-called molecule and cell in our biology. So that macro event and the immanent internal awakened event are coming together to create that catalyzing point. I just don't know that it's going to be a singularity as we've been led to believe.
And I would also call that point movement toward coherence and possibly ascension. But that's just me. Now I know you have only, I'll bet you I got one question left. So
you can go as long as you like. If this is going well, I mean, I'm happy to push back, but it's Christy's the boss in control.
She said 1 hour and I'm listening to Christy. But I'm torn between a question about Charlie Kirk. I really wanted to know what you were meeting with him about. And the other one is a fun question for you, Sacha. I want to know all about your airships.
Okay. Oh, Lord, you just asked such loaded questions. All right. In the first instance, I didn't meet Charlie Kirk. I'd been invited through Scott McKay, the organizers of a talk I think it was, I can't remember, the 29th of September, I think it was last year. It was days after Charlie was murdered. I was supposed to be on stage with him and Scott McKay, and I was greatly looking forward to meeting him. And I flew into the United States for that very reason, and I was at our NewEarth Tenassi land with Ethan and the crew out there, waiting for that. I was looking forward to meeting with him. Alas, alack, he got murdered, or was he? You know, he died, or did he? It's very, again, ambiguous and enigmatic, that whole situation. I'm at a point where I genuinely think he was taken down. I don't think that that's a simulation event, but I never got to meet him, so I can't speak to it. I think he was a very important archetype, very relevant to today, clearly very brilliant, clearly very godly, clearly ultimately led by his conscience, which is the very thing that I think probably ended up causing his demise. And the problem there was because the phones were going crazy when the day he got shot. My phone lit up and would not stop for a couple of days. And I was also vicariously communicating to Candace Owen through a very close mutual friend. In fact, I was hoping to meet her shortly after that happened, but that didn't eventuate. I mean, I've had a very long conversation with Candace Owens in the past on a number of shocking issues where she called me wanting a certain information and wanted to interview me, which I turned down at the time. I did not want to be pulled into that level of exposure through her podcast, because the work I'm doing is still too fragile to warrant being hauled into too much of that kind of spotlight. But the bottom line is, I didn't meet Charlie. I think that what killed him was the fact that he had unwittingly been inveigled or led into allowing his shtick to be engineered and orchestrated by Sabbatean interests. That's pretty clear to me. And by the time he awoke to that horror, he'd already crossed the line. He'd already done the deal. He'd entered the contract, so to speak. And you see, that is exactly why I walked away from the devil's contract many, many, many years ago, because it's an absolute science. If you commit yourself to it, there's no such thing as getting your foot in the door. And if you commit yourself to it, you are owned lock, stock, and barrel. And ultimately, the silver bullet can and oftentimes will find you if you try and step out of the contract. So I think that puts paid to that piece. On the airship side of it, can't say too much other than that we are and have been in dialogue with the leading airship manufacturers that I'm aware of in the world. And curiously enough, that's an Israeli group. And we are most likely going into some kind of partnership. My wonderful partner and director of the Africa NewEarth program is a industrial hemp guy, and he's leading the whole hemp exercise for us in Africa. That's a huge prospect. Again, that'll be listed on the NewEarth exchange when it goes live, but that is industrial hemp across the whole of Africa. We've petitioned parliaments and kings and ministers, and we've gone to these various meetings, and the laws are changing now in Africa, partly, I guess, because of the lobbying that me and my circle have been doing in this area. We've been explaining, and I'm getting to the airships, we've been explaining to government and to leadership in Africa that the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was the death knell to the hemp industry back in 1937, when Congress was bought by the petrodollar hegemonialists, the oil and gas barons, because they wanted to destroy hemp. So they outlawed marijuana by demonizing that and turning that into a political hot potato at the time, used that as a step toward outlawing the derivative of the marijuana, which is the hemp industry. Prior to that, as many people know, every farmer in the United States by law had to farm a minimum of 200 acres of hemp. Now, had that maintained sustained since 1937, had every farmer been farming 200 acres of hemp since 1937, there would be zero debt in the United States today. Forget about 20 or 30 trillion, whatever the fuck it is they owe. There would be zero debt had hemp continued, and had the oil and gas lobby not managed to buy Congress on that day and outlawed marijuana with the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. So that's a monumental historical calamity, which I worked out in my brain in the last couple of years. I thought, what? That's what it all goes back to. And then we looked at it and went, hang about, 1937, what else happened in that year? Well, the Hindenburg came down. The great Zeppelin, Hindenburg. That was the big 9/11 of the day. That was a psyop. Prior to that, airships were everywhere. Those ancient Tatarian buildings were built as tethering stations. The Chrysler building, many of the buildings in New York today were built, that are still up, were built with tethering stations to these docking onto airships. All around the world, when you start to research and see what was going on hundreds of years ago, airships were everywhere. And that was humanity being able to move seamlessly across imposed political borders. And we need to resurrect airships and hemp, because those are the two things. One represents the elevation of humanity off the horizontal plane into the vertical. And the hemp is an industry base that can be grown anywhere in the world and can manufacture 62,000 products off one plant. One single plant that was gifted to us by extraterrestrials millennia ago. There's an incredible story to the genesis of marijuana on this planet and who brought it in, when, and why. But it was literally a gift to humanity to emancipate us. So we can extract graphene, ceramics, oil, fibers. We can make literally every single thing in my studio here. I'm not sure about the mirror, but pretty much everything. We can make telephones out of hemp. We could, using hemp graphene. We can make silicon chips. We can make all the furniture, all the cement, all the asphalt on roads. Every single thing can be replaced by hemp. And that's just the fact of the matter. And it's something which could, if it was locally grown and then locally processed, and now we've got these automated hemp trains, that's what they're called, where you put the hemp in one end and it does the separation of the bast fibers and the microfibers and the oils, and it makes all those separations. Then you go straight into 3D printing, cast and mold and extrusion technologies, and all of a sudden you've got your bicycle, your toothbrush, your wheelbarrow, your ladder, every goddamn thing you need. You can literally design and make at home wherever you are in the middle of Mozambique, which, curiously enough, is why we're in Africa setting this into motion. So that means the end of all exports, literally all. You might need to bring in copper wire or cobalt or a few rare earth things, but in the main, you've certainly wiped out 95 to 97% of all imports, cheap hawk shit from China or whatever. It's no longer a thing. So the World Trade Organization, which was always a calamity, is out. Everyone gets back into autonomy, sovereign jurisdiction, and we can share technology, and knowledge transfer should then be shared so that everyone is sharing the engineering, the designs, the technology, the geometry, the mathematics, the physics, and we can all then move into a monumental upshift of humanity back to a true golden age, but one that is predicated on the organic and the sentient. So watch this space. Later this year, we've already got an order for 2 NewEarth airships from one of the governments that we're dealing with in Southern Africa. We'll see how that goes this year. That's something which later this year we look to launch the aerospace piece. I don't want to speak ahead of myself. We are, just what's that ghastly expression? Balls to the wall right now. Under-resourced, we've got brilliant people in our teams, but we're now launching the exchange, the treasury, and the bank precisely in order to consolidate how we want to take forward aerospace and quantum engineering and computation, all of those abstractions. So optimists, beware, because the living humans are the ones that will be claiming and inheriting this earth. We will not be walking around with androids doing our business.
Well, that brings us to the end of the hour, Sacha. So your timing is perfect. I was going to ask you about sound kind of versus water, because you were saying earlier that sound is it. That's it. Going forward, it's all about sound. I'm saying, no, it's about sound and water. But I feel like the water carries the memory and the resonance. But that's too long for now. And I want to thank you so much again for having me and trusting me enough to ask you these questions. And it's been wonderful being here today.
Thank you, my darling. Love you so much and look forward to embracing you. And I'm just going to bid farewell to the Instagram crowd looking in. I'm going to have to go off here because I need to focus with Marcia and Willardson and Ethan Lucas coming into the next bonus segment. But I'm not going to be able to use my phone to do Instagram for that. I've got to be checking my production notes. So I'm going to bid you adieu on Instagram. Thank you. Done. All righty. Very good. Okay, Christy, I'm all yours. Very good. Thank you. Okay, friends, let me just pull up my... do me a favor, let me put on my heating because I've got these studio lights on and it is really getting to me now. So what I'm going to do is pull up my production notes. Give me a second. Okay. Beautiful. There they are. Christy, kindly put up the slide of the next segment. Thank you very much indeed. Okie dokie. You can bring me back now. Very good. Excuse the noise out here, friends. Outside my studio, we've got builders, trucks, dumping lots of white rocks here because we're doing some building work. So please excuse those noises. Would you mind loading up the shotgun and just aiming out the window there? Thanks very much. Okay, very good. Friends, next segment here. What we're opening here is not a philosophical discussion. It is very important you understand that piece from the get-go. It is a foundational conversation for the New Earth movement itself. And I'm not just talking about the New Earth movement that I am engendering with my colleagues. I'm talking about the New Earth movement as it relates to you, wherever you are in the world. Good humans tuning in to the Lazarus initiative are here for a good reason. You are asking questions, and you're asking the right questions. But New Earth is not an idea. It's not a protest, and it's not a belief system. It is an emerging civilizational framework with real infrastructure, real accountability, and real responsibility. And as many of you know, New Earth is entering a concrete phase of manifestation as we see the geopolitical and socioeconomic landscape self-mutilating and falling into a dystopian wreckage. And no one has the answers as to where it will land. What are we going to find at the end of the tunnel? That's the delight of real calamity, that we are the ones who need to determine that outcome. But many of you know that New Earth is now entering a concrete phase, and I'm talking now about our movement that is connected to my next guests who are coming on. The rollout of a New Earth exchange, a New Earth treasury, private sovereign banking framework designed to operate lawfully, coherently, and outside the extractive control models. But none of that works. None of it will hold without clarity around law, jurisdiction, sovereignty, and participation. And the participation bit is the fellowship bit. That's the real glue that binds any paradigm shift. It's about the participation, the consciousness in action, the fellowship, which is you. So sovereignty has become one of the most misused words of our time. And for some, it's been confused with exemption, for others with rebellion, okay? And for many, with a kind of magical thinking that ignores consequence and responsibility. But New Earth is not interested in that. So historically, sovereignty was never about escaping law. It was about standing in correct relationship to law. So it was about understanding where authority actually comes from, why legitimacy matters more than power, and why freedom without responsibility collapses into chaos. So we're living through the consequences in that sense of a long drift away from first principles, where representation quietly became rule, where participation became compliance, and where value became extraction. And so the New Earth response is not opposition, it is re-architecture. Very important to understand that piece. And the first, this conversation that I'm about to have is introducing two pillars of that architecture. So the first is Blessings of Liberty, which is a sovereignty framework focused on embodiment, not theory, not rhetoric, but how sovereignty is lived in daily conduct, in interaction with institutions, and in right relationship with land and authority. And the second is the NewEarth Metric, a necessary evolution in how value and participation are understood. Because if we're building an exchange, a treasury, sovereign banking frameworks, land jurisdictions, and so on with our micronations, like the one in Tanasi, we must be precise about what we measure, what we recognize as alignment, and what we refuse to reward. So these are not abstract ideas. They are operating principles beneath the New Earth financial, legal, and civic architecture that's now coming online in 2026. And this is why this conversation matters now. So joining me, my two beloved colleagues who are not theorizing from the sidelines, but are helping architect this foundation. To those of you who know anything about me, you will know Marcia Willardson is a sovereignty educator and steward of the Blessings of Liberty course within the New Earth Sovereignty Academy, and her work grounds sovereignty and responsibility, neutrality, and lawful daily engagement. Marcia, lovely to see you.
Good to see you, Sacha. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, there are very things that I want to emphasize in what you've just said, that when we're talking about sovereignty, and we're talking about rights, our sovereign rights, we are living into a whole way that we've been designed to think. And so when we're talking about rights, many times we say rights and we're living in the distinction, we're really thinking entitlements. And we're talking about our sovereign rights. Well, what is a sovereign right? We look at a sovereign right. It's that right that by the virtue of that spark that happened when the sperm and the cell and the egg came together, and there was that spark of light. That really is the spark that we're reigniting in our own thinking and looking through the blessings of liberty at what is the real field that we've been living in all our life. How have we been designed within that field in what I call a collapse of distinctions? A right is not an entitlement. It is a responsibility. When we understand who we are as sovereigns, that the sovereign is that divine creature that came in with that spark and has 100% full responsibility for our experience here in this domain, in this 3D experience.
Beautiful stuff. Thank you, Marcia. My other colleague coming in, Ethan Lucas, a sovereignty researcher, a health practitioner, and co-architect of the NewEarth Metric, bridging lawful structure with biological, energetic, and systems level coherence, and exploring how truth and jurisdiction operate across governance, health, and value systems. Ethan, very happy to see you, brother.
Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, obviously I concur with Marcia as usual. And I concur with your earlier statement, Sacha, that the word sovereignty has been intentionally confused. And I think the biggest problem we've run up against and why it's gotten so much lashback from the courts and the media and the bureaucracy, because people have, and it may have been an intentional intelligence operation to do this, but they have taken the word sovereignty and they've blurred the lines with immunity, authority, jurisdiction. And today's goal, at least for me, and I think for Marcia as well, and probably for you, is to strip that confusion, to return to the first principles. And the key thesis for myself and for Marcia, especially here in Tennessee, is that America was not built with rulers. That is not a theory. That's not an opinion. That's an absolute historical and legal fact. It was built with representatives, trustees, and agents. And if the people aren't sovereign, then the Constitution of the United States of America is actually meaningless ink on paper. And again, these aren't opinions, these are absolute facts. And so we have to get people back to that point where they understand that, they comprehend that, and they're willing to exercise and put their foot down, exercise their rights, and stand their ground where they can rightly do so.
Very good, very good. Okay, let's dive straight into it. I've prepared 6 primary questions here that I think are going to more or less cover the gamut of what it is that we need to deliver as a payload in this segment. The first one, obvious one, what sovereignty actually is and why it has been so widely misunderstood. So the word sovereignty has been overloaded with confusion and fantasy and reaction, often equated with exemption and rebellion or opting out of law altogether. Which, of course, nothing could be further from the truth. But can you both clarify in your way what sovereignty means in its original lawful sense and why law remains essential and how responsibility, not entitlement, is the true foundation of freedom? Marcia.
It's, in my experience, it is the image recognizing, owning, articulating, being the image and likeness of the divine here on the planet, not just in words, not just in theory, but in actual fact, and looking every moment at how am I expressing the image and likeness of the Creator.
Beautiful. Okay, Ethan, jump in on that.
Yeah, and I would say from an American perspective, because that's really, I think, is the right perspective, even globally, when people realize if we can get back to what our founders originally started, what they created, it was really almost an anarcho-capitalist republic, because the sovereignty was recognized as the ultimate source of authority, and it was not placed in kings, it was not placed in states. We didn't get rid of one king and create 50 more. The sovereignty is not in the courts. It's not in corporations. Sovereignty has always resided in living people, collectively and individually. The Supreme Court of the United States has upheld this for a long time. It's just been swept under the rug through administrative ideologies and just through cultural degradation and devolution. And I would even posit that citizenship does not equal submission either. Citizenship really actually is supposed to be participation in the sovereignty. Our founders recognized themselves as sovereigns and as citizens, or no, in other words, members of this society that we could take part in and actually be accountable. We can self-govern and do what's right, walk and act in honor, and reject the false binary that sovereignty equals lawlessness or that sovereignty equals personal immunity. It does not. There's a key clarification. It's that rulers does not mean no law. It means no masters. And actually, the word anarchy comes from Latin. It literally means no rulers. And so that's why I present that idea that really that's what our founders in the United States created, was an anarcho-capitalist society. And that has been lost on people due to the programming.
Very good. Okay, so let's break. Sorry, Marcia, you wanted to add? You wanted to comment on that?
Yes, very much so. We look at how there was an indoctrination process. The elite rulers decided that it was better to benefit from a mass of worker bees doing all of their work, and they benefit from the energy that we're putting into that work. So we came through the public indoctrination system, the public school system that taught us to walk a certain line. And then we have an intermediary that tells us what we're qualified to do. And then we're set a path to do that, so that we work and we get up in the morning, we have the 9 o'clock to 8 to 5 job, and we give our energy to a system that supports the elite plan. And so we've lost we look at the Constitution, and the Constitution, and the federal Constitution says that in the 10th Amendment that those items that are delegated to the federal government they're limited to those authorities, and the rest is retained to the states or to the people. And you go in the Constitution for the states, and it says the people retain their sovereignty, and we're delegating to the states certain things that happen inside the states. And you realize that state, the first meaning is state of mind. So that public indoctrination is to keep us on that treadmill, into that flow of that state of mind, so that we're keeping that mechanism of the elite. And when we see in the state constitutions that sovereignty is retained in the people, but we're not taught what that sovereignty really means, that the living people are the authority that delegates anything to the state of mind of a collective state, and the states themselves give authority for the mutual protection that's provided by the federal.
Very good. So let's break this down, where authority actually comes from, and how that relationship was quietly inverted. The founding premise was that the people create government, not the other way around, right? We agree to that. Yet today, many experience institutions as rulers rather than representatives. And so what is it that historically shifted in the flow of authority, particularly in the late 19th century? And how does that inversion explain the jurisdictional confusion, overreach, and the dependency that we see now? Can either of you answer to that?
Do you want to go ahead, Marcia, first? You look like you're getting ready to talk.
It happened way before the 19th century. It is the thought form that we need an intermediary between us and our true relationship with that image and likeness, with the divine, with that divine spark that we carry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Agree.
I agree with that. Let me say, and actually, I'm getting ready to do a show series on this myself, talking about the 11th Amendment to the Constitution. That was the first amendment they made after the Bill of Rights. And this is very important to talk about. And this happened in response to what you're talking about, which is that sovereignty stack, which is important to recognize. The Declaration of Independence basically said government is instituted by people, living men and women. Powers are derived from the living men and women who are the sovereigns, and authority is absolutely conditional. Then the Constitution came, and it was written as a delegation of authority, just like Marcia just said, and it gave specific enumerated powers only. And nowhere in there does it say comply or die. It blows my mind to see so many conservatives, especially in the U.S. now, just chanting that comply or die, especially with all of the, crazy police tactics on the streets right now. It's wild to me. The Constitution was written as a restraint for the government. It was not written as a restraint on the people. And the Federalist logic that was actually created, when it was created, if it's understood properly, it was brilliant. It's that governments are the agents and the trustees, and the people are actually the principals and the beneficiaries, which is a fiduciary system. It's not a hierarchy. And so the government does not own the country. It actually manages, delegates functions for the owners. That's really its only purpose. Anything outside of that is it's treason, really, against the people. And you're looking at that sovereignty stack that Marcia was talking about, and how it works is the people are the high man on the totem pole. They're the original inherent natural sovereign, and then they created the states. The states then created the federal government via the sovereign people as a limited agent for specific enumerated purposes. And again, that's not rhetoric. This is actually explicit in the Constitution itself. It says we the people, not we the states, not we the government, we the people, the sovereign people do ordain and establish this Constitution. And we get all the Bill of Rights all the way up to the 10th Amendment, which Marcia was talking about, the 9th and 10th Amendment there, where anything that's not specifically delegated to the federal government was left to the states and to the people. The federal government has no independent sovereignty whatsoever. It's actually a tool. And just to finish my point, the 11th Amendment, which is where this shifted, I think, it was in response to a Supreme Court case, Chisholm versus Georgia. That actually happened a long time ago, back in 1793, and it terrified the states. You can look up what went down with that, what was said. But the court actually made the right ruling. It said that a state can be sued by a citizen of another state in federal court because sovereignty ultimately resides in the people, not the states as corporate entities. And Justice James Wilson, by the way, who was one of only 6 of our founders who signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, he explicitly made in his ruling a statement. He said, the people are the sovereigns. The states are but their agents. So this was not judicial activism. It was original constitutional logic, and it was applied faithfully. But the drift happened because that case scared the crap out of the government. And so they retaliated with what I would ironically say is actually an unconstitutional amendment to the Constitution.
Very good. Okay. Neutrality as a position of strength and not of withdrawal. So I wanted to speak to you both about that. Neutrality as a position of strength. I mean, Marcia, you speak to the embodiment element of law, but neutrality is often mistaken for passivity or disengagement. But historically, it functioned as a position of coherence, protection, and lawful standing. So what does neutrality actually mean in practice today? When is restraint more lawful than action? And why is neutrality essential to maintaining sovereignty rather than weakening it?
Well, we look very deeply at that in the Wisdom's Calling, the Blessings of Liberty conversation, because when we look at the groundwork that has been laid, that we've been indoctrinated to think inside the society, and we don't understand the fundamentals of that groundwork. We don't understand that there is a concerted formula, a plan for designing our thinking, and that there's what's called the Trading with the Enemy Act that said the enemies of the United States need to have licenses to do business with one another or to have intercourse with one another, where the whole idea of needing a license to act in life as an enemy of the United States. So when we really look at, when we argue, we're trained to defend your rights, speak up for yourself, and then we become an enemy combatant. When we take a side, whether it's political or religious or any of those divisive natures, we become an enemy or an enemy combatant, and we lose any observance or any realization or any relationship with any existential protections, the divine protections, or the constitutional protections that are there for us. So as an enemy combatant, we step out of those rights that we think we have and become impotent to defend ourselves, really. So that neutrality, when we come with a neutral posture, we retain our sovereignty, we retain our existence, and we have in the law of nations, which we rise to in the conversation with the blessings of liberty, that warring occupied territory that we're in, whether it's occupied territory of the mind or actual occupied territory, where we've been indoctrinated with government. Govern means control, ment means mind. So we bring mind control, and the difference is self-governance, that divine authority where we come in a neutral standing and we relate powerfully inside of the occupied territory, where we're protected not only by the warring powers, but by the divine intervention.
Right. And, thank you for that. And, it's such a curious conversation. Here we are, designing, engineering the neutrality, the blueprint of neutrality as a premise for unifying a fellowship of souls in, for instance, NewEarth Tenassi, which is our big project in the US, the micronations that we are taking forward in Africa this year, establishing, number one, a jurisdiction, and doing that coherently, and then bringing into that a fellowship, and then hoping that fellowship self-organizes into coherence, because you've created a blank canvas that is as pure form and true form as we can make it. And yet we still have problem. I mean, even internally, Marcia and I are on the phone every second day. We have a very big and nebulous ecosystem around the world. We've got teams in all continents. We're dealing in the breakthrough energy and engineering and technology area. We're dealing in breakthrough vanguard economics and crypto and NFT arena. We're dealing in hereditary redemption law and helping to bring about remedy at the macro level in the works we're doing with the International Tribunal and the World Hereditary Council, which are within our New Earth Nation coalition. We're dealing with industrial hemp and airships and these amazing projects, breakthrough projects, which are also having to find their feet on a planetary statutory landscape which doesn't understand or accept these ideas, which are old ideas that we're bringing back. We are cleansing soil and creating micronation states where we can bring in golden passports, golden visas, sovereign banking, all the rest of it. So we're dealing in all of these different areas in real time, all the time. And we have our General Assembly meeting once a week, and our core program directors from around the world all come in, or the ones that are not in Asia, because it's 3 or 4 in the morning at that time. But the point I'm trying to make is this, and this is just full disclosure. Marcia, you know full well, every 2 days I'm on the phone to you going, Marcia, another clusterfuck. I don't know how we're going to deal with this one. It's internal. This is to do with shadow boxing. This is to do with ego trips, personality clashes, all of that usual internecine shit show that afflicts every family constellation, every business constellation, every organizational constellation, every culture, every community. So how do we, this is my question, how do we, in truth and in honor and in grace, create a blank canvas upon which people can walk in and conduct right action in pure truth to the best possible outcome? What have we learned, Marcia? What have you learned in that journey? And I'll see if it tallies with what I've learned and learning.
Well, one of the things I've learned is that we all are trained to be very dysfunctional. And that inside of that dysfunction, we do have commitments, we have visions, and people see the vision for what we're doing and jump in. Yes, I see the vision. And now we have a commitment to the vision. And there's what happens on the way to the vision is that we exert that humanity, that dysfunctionality. We lose track of the commitment, and we look at, oh, there's an upset. What is an upset? It's an undelivered communication. It's a thwarted intention. So we get lost in the upset. We get lost in the debris that we've been living in, the dysfunction of our society, and we lose track of the commitment. So what we're tending to do, and we're looking to do inside of the New Earth model that we're looking to live forward with, is to see, well, what's the upset? What do we do about the upset? How do we handle the upset? It's not right or wrong. We're looking to stop that divisiveness, stop the vicious cycle of the dysfunction that we've been trained to live in. And we stand back and say, oh, it's an undelivered communication. Here's where we are. Here's where we are right now. Here's our commitment. How do we get back to that commitment? How do we clear the debris of the dysfunction that we've entitled? And that's what Wisdom's Calling the Blessings of Liberty is about. We look deeply at how that dysfunction was built as a society for us. Then we look deeply into ourselves and begin to really take a deep look at who are we in the face of who am I in the face of that dysfunction? Am I the dysfunction? Do I want to perpetuate the dysfunction? Or do I really want to bring that sovereignty, that neutrality, that love of the commitment that we are to the new earth?
Yeah. Ethan, path of least resistance to the highest outcome in engineering and architecting the premise of a utopian micronation or a fellowship of souls in a given location. What have you learned? Are you learning?
Well, I would say, obviously you have to have unity or nothing works. Everything is just in constant chaos. But sovereignty is still king. We have to preserve that at all costs, because if we don't, we create slaves of everyone, including ourselves. So we have this issue, like you said, of having unity among sovereigns. And I think the answer is that it has to be covenantal, which is why I love that we're making this an ecclesiastical establishment, because it's neutral. We're talking about neutrality. It's also covenantal. It's not hierarchical. Hierarchy says submit or be removed. Sovereignty says consent or disengage. And the only way sovereigns walk together without becoming draconian is by explicit covenant, clear, voluntary, consensual agreements that actually define what we're here to do, what we will not do, how we handle conflict, how we exit without punishment, and unity in that regard. If we're doing it without covenant, it always decays into coercion, which we don't want to see. That's what the outside world is doing. That's why we're building this. We're trying to get away from this. Covenant without consent also is just soft tyranny. So I think the first rule is simple. Unity must always be opt-in, it must always be revisitable, and it always must be reversible. Because if someone cannot leave without fear, without penalties or character assassination, I think sovereignty is already broken. Now, to the point of dysfunction, like Marcia was talking about, I would say, dysfunction is actually inevitable. Coercion is optional. And like you said, Sacha, every family, every organization, every community, there's miscommunication, there's emotional wounds, there's ego flare-ups, there's power struggles, uneven maturity. I think the mistake is trying to eliminate dysfunction, because that's always our trigger response. But I think if you take a different approach, don't try to eliminate the dysfunction. I think that's not really possible. You design for it. And I think that healthy sovereign systems assume that friction will happen, and they build on non-punitive pathways for resolution, which means no surprise rules, no emotional ambushes, no retroactive enforcement, no moral shaming as a control tool. We're looking at this draconian system out here that we're walking away from. They rely on fear to enforce compliance. But again, sovereign systems rely on clarity. And I think that's the difference between authority and dominance and true sovereign unity.
That was beautifully stated, Ethan. Very, very beautifully stated. And I love that. And I agree that we cannot be punitive in any way, shape, or form. That belongs to an old draconian era that we're all wounded from still. We're still carrying those trauma patterns. As Marcia was saying, essentially the challenge is how do we transmute and transcend and escape from such mindfuckery, because that's what we're all looking to exit from. And the truth of the matter is that most of our responses on a day-to-day basis are mammalian responses. They're deeply embedded trauma patterns that go back even before our lifetimes, so it gets very esoteric. But that is the fact of the matter, is we are deeply wounded creatures carrying a cluster of patterns in our behaviorisms, and that naturally clashes with others. So meeting that grace point within my own nature becomes the imperative. I mean, one has to just keep coming back to that, to 0 point and still point within self, and go, there is nothing, there is no conundrum, there is no ego battle out there, there is nothing out there that I cannot resolve in one luminous instant of recognition. Marcia.
Yeah, I really want to point to something you just said, because you said the grace point within your own nature. The truth is, your grace point within your own nature is neutrality, and that that we have habits of removing ourselves from our own nature by the dysfunction of the training of our society and the habits that we built, and our own what we would call, in the face of dysfunction, our own winning formula to get through the dysfunction. Your own nature is not that dysfunction. Ultimately, that's your sovereignty. Your own nature is your sovereignty, that neutral point where you are the image and likeness.
Yeah, and that's why I would say that covenantal relationships, that is the apex of a mature sovereign society, which is why Christ created a covenant. It's the new covenant in the New Testament of the Bible. It's getting rid of the old sacrificial system, the old hardline rules. It's based on grace. Sacha, you mentioned that grace point. And so I think that a real, true, successful sovereign community is always going to have to ask the question, is this person violating the covenant, or are they simply making me uncomfortable? Discomfort is not grounds for punishment, but violation of agreed terms is. This goes back to consent with sovereignty. And if you blur that line, you slide into that draconian control mechanism.
Okay, so then of course the question becomes, how simple can we make that algorithm, that covenant? How simple can we distill it into the most perfect sensibility and orientation toward individuated grace point? I, up until this point, have maintained only one living principle. I wouldn't call it a rule or a law, but I've been asked 1,001 times since the NewEarth project began. So what are the rules and regulations that govern this? Of course, one can write manifestos and all the rest of it, and one needs to do all of that. But to me, even the manifestos, beyond a certain point, become a kind of bullshit exercise. Because if you can't do what Blessings of Liberty is trying to do, which is to inspire right action, pure truth, embodiment, enactment in the way you conduct self in the now, not with referring to a manual or to a manifesto, but at what point does that become your being and your doing? Doesn't need to revert to a manual or a manifesto or a rule book. So that to me is the challenge that we've got with this New Earth social ecology. And I know that over the last decade, I've said, well, I refuse personally to countenance any rules or regulations. I simply won't harbor them. I'm a derelict, shock poet, reject, bohemian from sub-Saharan Africa, a former refugee, and rock and roll derelict. And I am the only thing that I want on my tombstone is #fuck the government. So how am I going to now be imposing new rules and regulations in any way, shape, or form? Well, because I am, insofar as I'm capable of being, I am a kind and generous and gracious human being. I know that much about my nature. So for me, it came down to one living principle, which is obviously do no harm. But it was about, in a given community setting, if you have any problem with another individual, you go and attend to that in the private. You simply go and sit in the private with that individual, but you never allow gossip or the flickering of shadows or the fomenting of consensus and opinion against it. You don't do that ever, because that's the old way, is to try to galvanize consensus and then to hijack the individual with an overpowered consensus and crush the dissent. But that's a draconian measure. If you can't go and sit and qualify that issue with the individual in honor and in full integrity, and you need to do that on the day before the following day's sunrise. This to me is the living principle. So I've always said that's my only golden principle. It's not a law, but it's a golden principle. And frankly, if you don't adhere to it, you are in violation of truth and honor. So I've still, no matter how many times I say that, it still doesn't eventuate. I still don't see it. I still have to phone Marcia up 2 or 3 times a week and say, and I'm not trying to get consensus with Marcia. I'm trying to act as a presiding elder with my core trustee. I'm trying to come to an understanding. How do we solve these problems? So I'm not trying to raise consensus. We have to confer with one another in a given system, and that's not the same thing. But you know what I'm getting at, this business of trying to raise consensus and then move against the other, that to me becomes the problem. That becomes dominion and supremacy again. But I'm damned at my middle age if I've worked out yet any principle that is greater than you need to go and speak in the private and try and resolve this in the private. If you can't do that, then you can bring it to arbitration and to a council or to the trustees or whatever. But why is it that living principle is still something which is so lost to even us, expert as we are in, I mean, how fallible is the human being in orchestrating these utopian ideals? I guess that's my question, because I still fail at it consistently.
Well, we all do, Sacha.
Go ahead.
Paul said that which I know, which is right, which I should do, I do not. And that which I know I should not do, I still do. And he wrote half the New Testament.
Well, and that's another strength of coming together with our dysfunctionality, with our trained thinking. The Essenes had an organization. They had a community where when you come into the community, you leave your shoes and your coins and the things of the world at the door, and you come in with agreement that, we're supporting one another to get back to the full expression of that divinity we actually have. And that's what I very much see the blessings of liberty as a conversation where we look at the war powers, we look at how that was built, we look at how the formula that has trained our thinking and formed some of our habits, because we have to be able to succeed and be successful inside of that dysfunction. That when we come into the society and we look at the blessings of liberty and we look at that war powers and we see the tool, the statement of truth, the affidavit, where you've gone deeply and you found your truth and you've written it in a way that cannot be rebutted. It's your truth. It's your statement of truth. Then that statement of truth taken into the world must be seen. And that's what we look at in the blessings of liberty. How does the world see your real statement of truth when you've got it written and your actions follow? So, and the beauty of coming together as a community to do that is we have an agreement to support each other there. We are those humans. We are trained into these habits. But if I can say, Sacha, you look at this habit of consensus, let's return to the commitment, then we move forward with greater velocity. And we've given our permission to point that out to each other, to raise each other as we're on our way through the dysfunction.
That's beautiful, Marcia. Thank you. Ethan, people are asking, how did NewEarth Tennessee fare with this monumental storm in Tennessee?
I'm sorry, say that one more time. I don't know if it's my Starlink, but it was kind of breaking up a little bit.
It's probably the storm. And people are asking, how did NewEarth Tennessee survive the storm in Middle America last week? Well,
Actually, Nashville got it much worse than we did here in the Appalachian Mountains for Tennessee. And I have, my main office still in Nashville with Sarona and my director of operations there. Luckily, she was in one of the small pocket of communities that did not lose power. And she finally ventured out today. She had to get new tires. Actually, I think the weather did a number on what was left of her tires. She needed new tires anyway. But when she said when she was driving to go get new tires, there were just trees down everywhere. Ice was crashing through the woods. It sounded like dinosaurs in Jurassic Park were going. I mean, there's still people actually downtown that still to this day right now do not have power. And they're asking, what do we do to get power? Apparently, some people were calling FEMA to see if they could get help. Federal government has not authorized any help for it. But here on the actual land, the NewEarth Tennessee land, we didn't get it so bad. I mean, it's been brutally cold. We got a few inches of snow. We got some ice, but other than that, we're faring well here.
Okay, well, delighted to hear it. When I was sent those photographs of the flooding of the land.
Yeah, the river flooded all to hell. I mean, it was bad. It came almost all the way up to the bridge, the bottom of the bridge.
Okay. Well, so was our ceremonial ground underwater?
No, it wasn't. It just kind of went around it. So that was nice. Yeah.
Right. That's terrific. So obviously the question then, given that the two of you are more expert than I am on these matters, what is the manifesto or the covenant or the constitution that is emerging for the New Earth Nation Coalition? Emphasis in Tennessee, because that community, which we're going to be doing a bigger unveil on Midsummer's Day, that at this stage is being planned, and we'll make more announcements about that soon. But what is the covenant, manifesto, constitution, so to speak? I'm going to let the two of you riff on that for a few moments so you can both take the mic. I'll just exit and listen from the sidelines on that.
Well, for me, the full covenant can't be written until all of the participants are engaged, so to speak, because when we understand that, yes, we have the physical place, we have the construction, we have these things that are going on, we have, all these parameters, literally. Like I think, talk about that thinking, that stuff that we've been working with, that we've been trained in the indoctrination. Each one of us is a critical element in what I call the alchemy of manifestation. We bring our energy, and anybody who comes in that's participating at any level, that energy that they're bringing is part of the alchemy on the way to the true divine covenant that we're building. So we can look at it from here, and we can make our outlines, and we can design what it is until we sit down as the New Earth Society, coming together in this meeting of the minds, and a clear mind to lay the groundwork. I don't think we can even envision the full covenant.
I agree with that. I mean, I still want to see it. And I think, Marcia, you agree that it needs to be laid out. And I have a lot of things. I know you have a lot of things in paperwork. I'm pulling things together as a rough draft. You and I are bouncing ideas back and forth to get this thing pulled together. But at the end of the day, it needs to be a stewardship type covenant. And I would like to see it be modeled very much after the way our founders here in the United States modeled the original republic before there was a bunch of chicanery and fuckery afoot that changed a lot of things culturally and have ignored things that are still there in plain black and white English, albeit in cursive. And I think maybe that's why they don't teach cursive anymore in school, because they don't want people to read what was actually in the founding documents. But that's what I'm looking at is, it's going to be based on natural law. It's going to be based heavily on the idea of sovereignty first, everything consensual, neutrality, and unity with consent and clarification, and not some of the things we were talking about. How do you deal with conflict resolution in those things, and not getting caught up in draconian condemnation and democratic processes where you have the 51% versus the 49, and screw the 49% because, well, there was one more person that thought everyone else over here should be treated in such a way, or these rights should be taken from. We're not doing that. So all of it in a large bucket. It's still kind of a mishmash, but those principles are there, and that's how it's being formulated.
And what we're doing mostly is we're looking at settings, looking at distinctions, so that we're actually speaking a common language where the language isn't ambiguous. We understand what we're saying to one another, so that kind of the lexicon so we're thinking together, and we literally do have a meeting of the minds speaking a common language, and that we come in with recommendations and the thinking, and that's why I see the blessings of liberty almost like a prerequisite for us to come in to clear ourselves and our minds to be the integral part of the meeting of the minds that is clear enough to meet.
So what does that, so are we talking about a premise here that can evolve? How flexible is a constitution once it is enshrined?
Well, this is the groundwork, the foundation that's actually laid there is that the land is being held in the ecclesiastic arm of the New Earth Nation Coalition. Actually holds the land for these ecclesiastic purposes. And each one of the people coming in who are going to be there have a specific part of that ecclesiastic groundwork as a steward for that person, for that part. And each one of them come together in the society as an equal basis for their conversation and for the expression of their stewardship. So it isn't an ownership. It isn't like the kind of concept that we have where, I go buy a piece of land, now I own it, or I think I own it, and I've got this deed of trust. We literally have taken the land, consecrated it for ecclesiastic purposes, and the people coming in with the mindset of leaving their shoes and their coins at the door, at the threshold, and coming in to build and be responsible, 100% responsible for all of it as a community of gathered sovereigns who know they're 100% responsible.
Okay, I like it. So building forward, what the New Earth movement is and is not. Let's just try and define that here. So the New Earth is moving into real world architecture, as I've been speaking to today. Once we bring, obviously establishing jurisdiction, building stuff, engineering and building stuff, but then also real world architecture as it relates to having an exchange, a treasury, and sovereign banking structures as well, that becomes something very, very pioneering, very unknown territory. No one's ever done that anywhere in the world. We're doing it in real time. It's all landing this year. People out there are looking to me and to you guys. And of course, our team of cryptographers and economists and financial experts and what have you. We're all part of a much bigger team. We're the kind of pundit factor at the front end of it. We're the ones that do the interfacing and talking about it. But it's real stuff that we're architecting. What does the NewEarth Metric make visible that traditional systems ignore and have historically ignored? What is this moment explicitly not, and what does responsible, lawful participation look like without ideology, reaction, or projection? What is remarkable in your view about what it is that we are innovating, engineering, architecting, bringing to the world this year? I'll start with you, Ethan, on that.
Well, I would say back to your original point when we first started, New Earth is it's not a concept. It's not just an idea or conversation. It is being built. And what we are forming here is essentially at a raw nuts and bolts level. It's a private covenant-based gatherings and member frameworks rooted in natural law and voluntarism. This isn't entertainment. It's not a real estate development project. It's not a commercial project. It's alignment. It's stewardship. It's embodiment of sovereignty and living that out the way Christ did, the way his disciples did. And like I said before, while it may look from the outside, and I feel like this is why we're probably having this conversation, that not a whole lot may be happening, but this is a season of consolidation and preparation. We are moving deliberately, building the foundation quietly, because if you don't have the foundation proper before you build anything, inevitably, no matter how pretty it is, no matter how much wow factor you have, it will collapse. And you have to have that foundation right without compromise to build something that lasts. And what we are building is, in essence, the short version of it, it's a parallel society. We're going to be living it. We are living it. It's very structured. It's very real. And, a lot of the things that to me, this is sad. And as a minister myself, and I teach the Bible and I go really deep, and I've been doing it for many, many years. What Christ taught is not being taught in the churches now. They're teaching some kind of Christ belief that almost isn't even real. They're not even teaching people to embody the Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied and lived out. This idea that he's going to be returning in the clouds, flying out of the sky like a cartoon or something on a white horse like Lone Ranger dodging 747s and Chinese spy balloons, that they're missing the bigger concept. And so I know a lot of people do that with these things. We're not doing anything cartoonish or idealistic. We're literally embodying it, living it, and we are building it. And that's essentially what it is. If you want to put it in a very short line, this is the parallel society that Jesus started 2,000 years ago with his disciples, that got tripped up, got brushed under the rug, got infiltrated, and got changed. And we are bringing it back.
God, it sounds to me, Ethan, as though you're describing the meek inheriting the earth, no more.
100%.
No less. I didn't know that you and I were classified as meek. I know that Marcia probably is, because she's a lot.
No. Sacha, you have to understand something. There's some word magic afoot here. The word meek, they changed the definition. It does not mean soft and just sit back and take a beating and let whatever happen. The meek are actually the strong, immovable defenders of truth and sovereignty. And that's what Jesus was talking about. In fact, if you go back, Marcia mentioned the Essenes. Jesus was part of the Essene and the Nazarene communities. If you go back and look at what they understood that word to mean when Jesus said that in his Sermon on the Mount, that the meek shall inherit the earth, it meant something quite different. It meant something more like what I just said rather than what we've been taught that it means.
Yeah, beautiful.
And that is a very important point in what exactly we're talking about. And you're talking, how do we look to right now? And my oldest brother used to say, when he was greeting, he says, well, hi, what do you know for sure? And so, even though many of the times I've started not even hearing him say that, it really is what the mirror that I intend to project in this whole thing, where we're looking at how am I designed, thinking wise, in the experience. And of 60 years, I've been gathering experience and gathering relationships and gathering observations in coming on. And every day I look to see, what do I know right now for sure? What do I know that is really what I know personally? It's my truth. I see it as truth. And how can I project that into our now experience of this new creation? Yes, I've seen all this. I've seen the history. I've seen but one of the things that I said years ago, and I'm starting to see it in the culture, is you can lead a human to knowledge, all this knowledge, but you can't make them think. So a thinking person, a person capable of critical thinking, is that person who is capable of projecting the sovereignty that we're really coming forward with. It's an old design, an internal design coming forward into our new manifestation.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let's we're going to be winding down in the next few minutes. I just want to refer to some questions from the audience. One question here: who turned anarchy into evil? The churches? Well, I think that's a fairly succinct way of putting it myself, and I think yes, the organized religion or organized religiosity, which is to say the churchish mind, which is to say cult programmed thinking and acting, being and doing, when you are not acting in sovereign consciousness and conscience, but you're acting in concordance with the external will of the church, the state, the crown, the government, the statutory provisions, all of that shit that exists out there in the kingdom of the devil, that is the line. So yes, I think it's safe to say that the churchish organized religiosity was the capture. It was also, when you talk about anarchy, who turned anarchy into evil? Anarchy in and of itself is a foundationally healthy instinct, as Ethan reminds us. But when you're burning witches at the stake because they are seeing common sense and espousing common sense in the local village hamlet, that becomes the onset of the diabolical. That becomes evil incarnate. And yes, you can categorically, archaeohistorically, turn your blunderbuster at the church, hopefully pull the trigger and blow its fucking face off, because the churchish religious constructs are indeed the very kingdom of the devil. But that Vatican monstrosity then became, through the Jesuitical enclaves, the weaponization of the Christic faith. And that's the distinction here. So the Christian faith, the Christic faith, couldn't be more pure, couldn't be more perfect in its genesis. And as Ethan also alluded, and Marcia as well, the Essenes and the Cathars just go back to that's the real genesis. You got to look at the Essenes versus the Pharisees if you want to understand Cain and Abel, if you want to understand good and evil, if you want to understand the great paradox that we've been living through. But yes, the organized religion and churchish mind is indeed where anarchy, or good, free roaming human beings, were demonized and turned into the enemy of the state. Or the
Sacha, can I add one thing to that? A lot of people don't realize this, but the word church never appears one time in the Bible. If you go back to the original Hebrew in the Old Testament and the original Greek in the New Testament, the word church does not exist. In the Old Testament, you have synagogues and temples, and in the New Testament, you have the same thing, but you also have the Greek word ecclesia. And that is the word that they mostly falsely translated, I might add intentionally, into the English word church, because in ecclesia, they couldn't deal with that. Ecclesia, if you look this up in Greek history, it was a lawful assembly of sovereigns. It was a civic body, not a religious one. And I would like to posit the idea that actually this is exactly what we are doing, is bringing back the original ecclesia and walking away from the draconian church structure.
Very good, Marcia.
And when we look at in history, or if we take the dictionary, the Webster's dictionary that was written by Webster at the time of the Constitution was written, and the reason he wrote it was so that we understood the language of the Constitution at the time that it was written. Those words and phrases have changed and changed and changed over time. If you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you got the first, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and all of those definitions change. I gathered history books because I wanted to know what was going on. And I've taken one concept, I was going to write a whole book about it. We take one concept of history and you look at the history books along each one of them, the way that it's being taught and what the results of that one concept are changed and altered through the education system. So that government mind control has been a stealthy encroachment on our own sovereignty.
Lovely, lovely. Well, let's, I'll just refer to a second. I've got a couple more questions here. Elon is conning the world with his fake space program. Well, I don't know that that speaks directly to this conversation on sovereignty and jurisdiction and embodying right action and natural law. But it is an interesting enough question to raise, given the fact that Elon Musk does represent a nexus point in where the entirety of the human imagination is about to be directed into this Optimus piece that I was speaking to in the earlier segment, where we're about to now become the age, a generation of automation, where we have the biggest selling product in the history of the world is predicted now to be the Optimus robot. The Russians, the Chinese, and the Koreans, everyone else are trying to also get their robots to do backward somersaults. Mostly they fall over. It's hilarious watching. But the Optimus thing is real. Tesla has already turned the whole Tesla car thing into a manufacturing, global manufacturing. They're already manufacturing millions and millions of these Optimus robots. So they're about to hit the shelf, so to speak. Everyone's going to have one. This is Skynet landing from the sky into your friendly neighborhood, into your bedroom and your bathroom, actually, when it comes down to it. So it would appear that the Tesla car, electric car or car thing was a bit of a setup. I would agree with that. It's clear that it's military money behind the rollout of the satellites, Google, Schmoogle, Google Gestapo, metadata surveillance, Dragnet, Skynet. Clearly that was behind the money that was then pumped into Elon, who was always a very brilliant, somewhat autistic, ketamine-infused genius. But the point being that he has been conflated into the archetype of the Iron Man. I've not met him. I don't know him. I've got a number of mutual friends. I know people who've known him for 30 years and been close to him. I'm fascinated by him from the armchair perspective. I don't have a particular ambition to emulate that kind of grandiosity in this world. It scares me a bit. But I do also know the owners of the money behind him, which is a story that the world is not aware of. I also know the owners of the money behind Bitcoin. That's a hell of a story, which when I'm allowed to speak about it, I will speak to it. But I've known that stuff for many, many, many years. So long before Elon Musk became a thing, became a meme, became an orchestration, a kind of agent, a Vatican icon. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but he is a conflated archetype. Be clear about that. And now that we're seeing his $1 trillion infrastructure around the world, which all manifested very quickly over the last few short years, unbelievable logistics, SpaceX, Neuralink, Hyperloop, all of this stuff, now pivoting into mass manufacturing these robots that everyone is going to have, ghosting them or shadowing them in life. That to me speaks to an agenda. That to me categorically speaks to an agenda. And it is the bifurcation point of the living from the dead. Like I said at the beginning of the Lazarus Symposium today, it's a distinction between the end of the Saturnian satanic age into the Luciferic age, which is still a false light age. So it's a choice. We can move into that false light. We can allow ourselves to become indentured into the mark of the beast, which could be the Optimus creature next to us, every bit as much as it was apocryphally written up as being the 666 tattooed on our fucking penis. Like, I don't know how that stuff plays out, but I do know that the mark of the beast is actually your permission granted to become indentured into the false light. That's what the beast is. That's what 666 is. That's the mark of the beast, is you making a determination to grant permission to anything that moves against your conscience. So I'm going to leave that as my final comment on that. And God bless and God love Elon Musk and everything that he's doing. Again, same thing with Donald Trump, same thing with all of these icons that I find are foundationally benign, but what's behind them, nested in the basement, that becomes another subject matter altogether, which we're not going to speak to today. Someone else is saying, go, Sacha, go. Been saying the same thing for decades. Yes, thank you. I'm glad at least one human being has been out there as long as I have, listening to my warbling. It's nice to know that I'm not entirely alone. I say that because this week I also reflected on the fact that there is not a single soul left standing with me in this temple that I started the journey with. And there were hundreds of them in 2013, hundreds and hundreds of them. And there's not a single one standing left. And I've had to go through incredible evolution, and myself, I've had to shed, discard, move, transmute, transcend. I've hit, I believe, an octave of really, really laudable souls, of which Marcia and Ethan are two prime vectors in this incredible journey. Their life's work coherently landing like God's geometry perfectly into my life's work. And there are a number of others as well in our team whose life's work also nests in to become this beautiful movement. So thank you for that kind comment, Laurie. And
if I may, I'm just really chomping to get understanding the psychology is what all of this marketing and Elon Musk and where we put our attention. As long as we give them our attention, we are giving them the energy that gives them any power at all. And Sacha, you said several times, everyone will have one. What if nobody bought it? What if we stood firm on our own technology and our own understanding? We are the ones who consent and give them our attention and our energy, and we give them our money. And so and I've worked with this and walked with this for over 30 years, because I don't use credit cards. I don't use all those things that they've moved us into this whole digital currency. And I've watched it since the 70s, how they've just like turn down the thumb screws of us not using the money, using lawful money, not using all this, and that the whole society just goes that direction. And it's the power of the society going that direction that gives it any energy. Everybody's going to own one. Well, guess what? That's their authority. That's what gives them the power. You are the power. Your attention and your energy and where you put your money and where you put yourself and your thinking. And if you buy their things, you are fueling their momentum.
Oh, people pay no attention to her at all. I'll be lining up and ordering my Optimus on Amazon before anyone.
Sasha's going to have Neuralink next week.
Wait, because I want my shower to be, the water temperature to be set for me before I get out of bed in the morning. I want that cheese souffle to perfectly rise in the oven. And if it takes an Optimist to do that, I'll be the happiest man alive.
Well, Sacha, there's an answer to this. The problem is not the technology. You know, we're building the technology here with New Earth. The problem is where you, like Marcia said, where are you putting your energy? Who are you supporting? You have to start boycotting the worldly system, start moving your time, focus, energy into the New Earth, because again, the problem is not the technology, it's who's behind the technology.
Exactly. And the hardest part of standing true to myself and my conscience has been the 80% of the culture that takes it everything in the other direction.
Yeah.
The Bible actually prophesies a time like this in what it calls the end times. And by the way, it never talks about the end of the world. It says the end of the age. Well, we've reached that. It's talking about the end of the age of Pisces. The beginning of the age of Aquarius is ushering in this technological revolution. And what you're going to see is a separation of the wheat and the chaff, as the Bible calls it. And you're going to see two operating parallel societies. You are witnessing biblical prophecy, end times prophecy, as they call it right now. This is it.
Yes, indeed. And that does go back to the meek inheriting the earth. I've always laid claim to the fact that I represent the meek. We represent the meek. We are the meek. Thank you for the correction on the etymology of the word meek. I'm really interested to hear that piece, Ethan. I happen to know, and I've been saying for the last at least 3 or 4 years, that by meek inheriting the earth, my interpretation of the word meek is he or she who is as bold as a lion. He or she who can walk as Daniel into the lion's den and walk through the valley.
Well, notice Daniel was neutral.
Yes, right. Indivisible, exactly.
And what ended up happening because of his strength, his meekness, his neutrality, the lions didn't touch him. And the men who were his accusers, who were part of the legal system of Babylon, they were then fed to the lions, and the lions they created ate them.
Right. Well, either way, the lions got fed. And that, I think we'll all agree, is a very, very good.
Very important.
So
we don't want any starving pussycats.
Exactly. Turning to the audience. Past the hour already. I've got Christy, producer, in the back room, probably shuffling her papers roundabout now. But I'm going to go to one last question. Hey, boss, what do you make of the orb phenomena, particularly the ones in the sky? Well, a slight breakaway from the conversation that we've just been having on sovereignty and jurisdiction. Or is it a breakaway? It's all interconnected. The geometry of God is absolutely coherent. So the conversation actually warrants speaking to. The orb phenomenon is a hyperdimensional interfacing with the third density temporal plane. So anyone who has any understanding of hyperdimensional physics or physics beyond the Newtonian soup understands that we have a convergence taking place, and the shift in the geometry of light that is taking place in this realm at this time, at this end of time, the shift in the geometry of light is what we are witnessing. Now, that is also what is, when you speak about the grace of God, when you speak about revelation, when you speak about the end of the age, the apocalypse, and moving in through redemption towards salvation. That's the geometry of what we're biologically and geophysically living through. So the lights in the sky, the hyperdimensional, interdimensional, subdimensional objectification that we're going to be able to witness now, that we were not able to witness for a long period of time. In the ancient world, we did see UFOs, we did see the Vimana, we did see these things. Very old texts speak to it. Ancient manuscripts, ancient cuneiform tablets, ancient petroglyphs speak to the truth of the old age. We were interfacing with the unicorn phenomenon. We were interfacing with the elven and the fairy and all the rest of it. We lost our innocence. And we were dialed out of those hyperdimensional planes of existence and reduced and diminished into only being able to observe through the diminished visible spectrum of light, 3 to 4% arguably at best of the full spectrum of light. Now, as the geometry of light is shifting, both immanent, internal, which is by the grace of God, the revelation that is occurring, the true second coming, which is emerging through the activation of our fractal DNA as it connects to the hyperspheres. Each of us are going through that shift point. We're either going to have the courage to move into that revelation inwardly, or we're going to start numbing ourselves with substances and alcohol and addictions, and we're going to miss the fucking boat. And that is a travesty. That is a calamity. We must be sober in what is coming. I was warning everyone around me, especially those that I love, step away. Midsummer last year, Tanasi, when we did what we did in that consecration proclamation event, that was a line in the sand. That was the line in the sand that said, none shall pass. The gods are not favoring any of us who are not standing in pure truth right now within relationship to self. So that is the distinction. I'm not a teacher, but I'll pick up a goddamn stick and I'll preach this one from the rooftops right now, because there is no more time left. We have not got any time left. It is now about you in the now and pure form, true form, return to relationship with self, absolute sobriety in your relationship with self. It is integral to how you become the meek, how you become the emancipated child of God, the son or the daughter of God Most High. Friends, I'm going to leave the conversation at that, other than to say the objects out there, the UFOs out there, the extraterrestrial elements that are coming, much of which is going to be psyop, much of which is going to be orchestrated, some of which will be organic in its own way. None of that matters. The immanent flame and the emergence of the true second coming within you and your relationship to the Christic flame, the Sophic wisdom flame, that, my friends, is where you belong, fully actualized in the geometry of the living moment. Marcia, Ethan, thank you both so very much for joining us on Lazarus today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, Christy, you can take us away. Friends, I'm going to bid you farewell myself, and I will be running the screen, going into the kitchen and cooking, because it's what I do in Mexico. I cook 3 times a day. So blessings, and thank you for your kind attention. Well, 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 Lazarus, it's that time of year, your favorite time of year, and I dare say your favorite guest. And I've not seen him myself since October, when we were both on the mythic cruise of the Aegean Sea. And what a delight it was to spend time with your favorite galactic historian and polymath, Dave M.